I get the sentiment though.
Yeah. It was all well.
You see Stafford there, it's like last night, right?
Thankfully didn't have to be there, but like more for him. Be there, Laura?
No, I know Kevin was. It was late, like 11:30.
Just let me know when we're live.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get Arish in because he was as an attendee, but. Well,
Hey guys, thanks for putting me on as a panelist.
of course.
Upgraded the sound in here.
Surround sound.
Sound great.
Should I start singing? Do you guys want to hear how good my pipes are?
I mean, you sound like you're telling me my flight's ordered.
All right. No, somebody has been messing with this system and it's got all out of whack. But we can hear you. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great, thanks.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chair, you're good to go.
Before I call the meeting to order, we have an important decision to make, which is, do we eat now or should we call recess halfway through? Because last year, remember, like no one would go eat, and then everybody, all staff was waiting for us to eat so they could eat, and we've got to
Get some food.
Okay, so food now. Okay, go.
All right.
Go ahead.
You would get that shot.
Can you guys describe what's there so I can live vicariously through you?
Why, there's a big spread. We'll just say that.
Who did the catering?
A little bit of everything. Wait. So.
Anything you're gonna finish?
Well,
Or are you still getting those?
it's
Question, whatever they call it.
I think we're down to like 2 or 3 months. Options to deliver. And
So, yeah, yes.
if we have, I mean, the numbers just stopped moving.
Mhm.
So we just ran all new. January, that's fine.
Yeah.
Once I'm in.
What about-
I think we're still yellow.
Okay.
I need to use it. I scooped it with the lemons.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, not this, you know, it's.
I'm saying that, it should be done.
The one lemon.
And they warned you that there was no more questions, right? Did that pan
Yeah,
out?
we do that from last year.
Yeah.
Just still more of the same transition stuff as just.
It's essentially phrase back.
I mean, everything they're asking for is.
I know, I mean, because I usually. Wow, that purchase is. Like, they not try and they buy.
Yeah.
Yes. So our meeting has started, so we're.
Oh.
And Arish gets to listen to us eat.
So if you work at least 4 hours on the, wow.
Well, it ain't no one
Nice, excuse me.
I mean, yeah, it works out. Thanks.
Credit hours, which have taken a lot of.
Potato. Yeah, all ground potatoes. And there's a cheese manicotti tray. Matt, I think you're a vegetarian. Is that right?
I sort.
Okay, well, it's cheese.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
You guys are making me hungry. It's like manicotti, potatoes au gratin. Sounds good.
We're all gonna be asleep halfway through this meeting, so.
Early.
You don't have to sit back there.
I think we can go ahead and get started while staff continue to enjoy the meal. Thank you very much for providing this. I'll go ahead and call our meeting to order. And we'll send, where are you, Arish? We'll send you should we send you a plate or?
Yeah, I wish I'm in LA.
It'll be a little cold.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being for the December meeting. I was a transit company board of directors. I'll ask our secretary to call the roll.
Chair Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chair O'Connell.
Here.
Harish Gudger.
Here.
Matt Harris.
Here.
Praveen Kappa.
Here.
Hillary Orr. Here. Kirsten Phelps. Laura Gates. Here. Ajay Thomas.
Present.
Arthur Wicks.
Here.
Chair Kaplan, you have a quorum. Those absent, Kirsten Phelps.
All right, thank you. And Kirsten indicated that she had a conflict tonight and won't be able to join us. We move into our public comment section of the meeting. So if we have any speakers for public comment, I have a statement that we read just to kind of set the ground rules for our public comment period, but we look forward to hearing from you. I will ask first if there's anybody in the room who wishes to be recognized. I know it's
All staff.
all staff.
All staff.
Do we have anybody pre-registered who's on Zoom?
Somebody registered, I don't know if they're on Zoom, but it's Tiffany Price.
We'll see if Ms. Price is on the call.
Did not see that name.
Okay. Well, we'll ask then if there's anyone who on Zoom who did not pre-register who'd like to be recognized, please use the raise hand feature. We'll pause for a minute. All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Moving into the chair's report, and a lot of my report is kind of reflections on the year and some significant highlights, but we do have one business item. We have a board member nominating committee, which Matt and Jesse serve on, and they've asked to give us an update on the search.
Yeah, thank you, David. And this is a very brief update. We just wanted to let everyone know we have had the application open. We've gotten some great interest, some really compelling nominees, but we are going to keep it open until January 2nd because as everyone will remember, this is a seat that one of the requirements is transit industry expertise. So we are trying to build the pool a little bit to ensure that we're looking at multiple candidates that sort of meet that criteria of transit industry expertise. So we're going to leave it open until January 2nd. We're going to review our pool at that point, at which point we will move to interviews and hopefully have a nominee to recommend to this board shortly thereafter.
Appreciate it. Thank you both for your service, and with the extension, if you know anyone who you think would be a great fit for this board, please spread the word and encourage them to get in their application. It's all done online. So first is just to wish everybody happy holidays and to ask our finance director, when do we get a Dash themed holiday card? Because I know someone who would give you a lot of business if we could get King Street trolley under the holiday lights and happy holidays. Because I love supporting the Old Town shop. I would much rather buy my cards from you all. So if you come up with a good product, I think you'll have some business next year. So I'll take that back with you. I wanted also to mention, and many in this room are probably familiar with this, two of our council members have a podcast called The Council Connection. Raise your hand if you've listened to any of the episodes. Okay, so a bunch of you have. I just discovered it recently, a few weeks ago, and I listened to their, this is Vice Mayor Bagley and Councilman McPike, and they go through each month's update on council docket. They also have special guests they bring in. They do Q&As. They collect questions through Blue Sky and 311. The October meeting recap, which I was listening to while I was just working in the kitchen, didn't have any Dash specific items, but we kept coming up in the podcast. And I thought that was so interesting. It related to how to get to events, how to appreciate the newly closed 200 block of King Street, in relation to discussions about parking minimums, in relations to housing. It reminds us that Dash is really a part of the fabric of this city beyond just this is a transportation item that we spend money on to move people from point A to point B. And to hear two of our elected officials really coming back to the importance of Dash and so much of what the city does really was very meaningful to me. And I just learned a lot in listening to the podcast. And it sounds like they have a really great fan base, which speaks so much to the kind of interest and engagement of our citizenry in the city. So I congratulate Vice Mayor Bagley and Councilman Pike for a really wonderful podcast, and look forward to hearing more and hearing a lot more about Dash. And finally, I want to reflect just on the year that has passed. This was a year, I think back to January, that started with so much uncertainty and anxiety for the city, and that didn't really get better in a lot of ways. And many of us around this table have dealt with that. Many of us have family members, friends, neighbors who have dealt with that. We've seen the impacts of funding in this community. We've seen the impacts of people who may not feel welcome here anymore, and it is challenging. But through all of that and through the storm clouds that have always seemed to be just off on the horizon, coming to Dash, coming to this board meeting and seeing all the things that we accomplished by basically just showing up and continuing to provide the service that's in our ride guide to people so that they could move from point A to point B and access city services, access healthcare, access shopping, be in nature, is really remarkable. And I made a list in my head, and then I went and looked at our press releases from the year, and I just want to read off just a few of the many accomplishments that we had this year. I'll start with kind of things that impact this board. We onboarded a new city finance board member. We're very happy to have Laura. We appointed a new vice chair who has already ably represented the board at several community functions. We heard from every department head at Dash, and this had started the year before, to really learn about what are you proud of? What are the challenges you have? How are departments working together? And by doing that, that really helps us to better understand the organization and to have, better conversations about kind of how to solve problems. And we're not asking every month kind of basic things that are, fundamental to how you do your job that we just don't see. We really appreciated all the effort that went into doing that. We had our first ever joint Dash Council work session. We discussed the system's future and priorities. That was a very, very important milestone. It never, as far as I know, happened in Dash's history that the board and the council had met together for that purpose. On kind of the Dash side, record ridership once again. We had a wonderful celebration in the fall. We had a balanced budget with a small surplus. We accepted delivery of two 60-foot electric buses as a result of a grant awarded to Dash under Commuter Choice I-395. Broke ground on the facility expansion project. We won a no-low grant from FTA to support state of good repair, and we'll find out just in what way and how much soon. We marched in the World Pride celebration. Jason and I represented our board along with Josh and many among the staff, and that was just absolutely wonderful. Councilman Gary was there as well, wearing a WMATA shirt, but he changed midway. Yes, he showed up, and I was like, "Who's this guy? Who's this guy?"
Yeah. You need like the Kelsey mom that wears that jersey that sits down the middle. We need to get him a half and half one.
But that was an incredible moment, and there was so much love for Dash, and I was delighted to be part of that. We won awards from the Virginia Transit Association and the Community Transit Association of Virginia, and we were able to enhance service on 3 Dash routes, bringing us closer to completion of the 2022 new Dash network. And on the city side, we have now not just an inventory of all our buses, but we have a dashboard that tells us all about accessibility of buses that will help community members and city staff and decision makers understand where do we need to focus to improve the experience of riders waiting at stops. So incredible year. The staff could probably come up with a dozen more that are at the top of head that we didn't even get to, but I think that just shows the incredible things that went on this year amidst so much challenge in the community. So thank you for all that you do, and I hope in whatever way feels good to you, take some time as you have hopefully some leave over the winter break and think about all the great things you did and prepare yourselves for the year ahead. Thank you. So that's my.
You've done your homework for the stockholders meeting. I'm gonna take some notes from it.
Yeah, right, all the things we lit, but your press releases, so Villa, I think your team deserves credit for that. And there were things I didn't even remember where that's just how long this year has been. I was like, oh, I didn't know that happened this year, but that was yeah, there's a lot of great things to talk about. So I'll turn this over to Hillary for the TNS director.
Sure. Big accomplishments this year. So as David was talking, it was reminding me that I had just pulled together a list of transportation. I was looking at how much funding we had received over the past year for transportation. And we do have a transportation funding dashboard. So I was able to just now very quickly separate that out for transit. And over in 2025, we received funding, and this is not counting the Lono grant, for about $14 million for projects that have transit components. So okay, so couple things that happened over the past month. I think the most notable one is that the Envision Route 7 BRT recommendations kind of came out for Alexandria, and so this still need to be voted on and approved, but that this is the route that is would be a regional BRT route coming down Route 7. And in Alexandria, it was always going to come down from King Street down Beauregard, and the question was, do we terminate at Mark Center or Southern Towers, or do we go to both? And so our staff has been working on that kind of work group. We had advocated at one point to say, should just continue all the way down the current route that goes down Jordan Street and Duke Street and all the way to the King Street Metro. The recommendation that is coming out now is that it would terminate at Landmark Mall. So that adds more service in Alexandria, and right now they're looking at hitting both Mark Center and Southern Towers Transit Center. So it hit both of our all three of our major transit hubs in Alexandria if this route gets approved. So that was kind of news to us when we saw that recommendation, but I think that's really good for that route and providing the connectivity to other BRT routes. We held a pop-up for the West Alexandria Transit Center, so the one at Landmark, to get feedback on some concept plans of what that could look like. That was on November 19th. I had in the notes, the merit grant program change proposal. And so this is something that the RPT is leading. It's an effort to kind of look at how the funding that comes back to the cities would be evaluated. The proposals that were currently out there were not favorable for Alexandria, and so it was looking like we would get less money, but that proposal was just postponed from the CTB, and so the new administration will be voting on that. So I don't know if you all saw that we have a new Secretary of Transportation, Nick Donahue. Some of you might be familiar with him. He's done work with a lot of us. So I think that's really good for Alexandria and for Northern Virginia and urban jurisdictions.
Hillary, if I could also just add regarding merit, on the two state associations, which I serve a leadership role, I took a very strong stance that the recommendations for merit need to be delayed and reconsidered. The team here, Raymond and the city, have looked very extensively at this. And I think a big concern about it is the look back period and how unreliable it could potentially be in the future as far as understanding how many funds we're getting. And eventually I sent a letter from Dash on behalf of Dash, also asking for an extension in the timeline. So we spoke out sort of in 3 different forums to say, hey, pump the brakes on this, give us the time to understand it. Not saying we're totally against it or completely for it, just that it was very rushed and there wasn't a lot of engagement. And years ago, before I even came to Dash, I was part of the original Transit Advisory Committee that helped to build this program. It wasn't called Merit at the time, and set the original framework for how the calculations are made. And it's been revised over the years as in accordance with the requirements. So this is kind of aligned with the law requiring them to look at it and revise it, but with an outgoing administration trying to push this through, we really felt like it needed more time to be looked at. So just some more context for that to help you all understand how we at Dash have been engaged on that.
Absolutely. Josh's team has been really taking the lead on this, so it's been a joint effort. The last thing I just want to note is the Long Bridge rail shutdown, and that the construction is slated to begin on this in January. And so there's been a lot of work trying to figure out how to keep existing rail service going and what that's going to look like for rail, but they'll only be permitted to operate construction between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. on weekdays. And so then all rail service between DC and Alexandria is going to have to stop. So it's expected to last up to 5 years. It's going to be disruptive for rail, but it's going to be an overall huge benefit. And these are the types of delays and inconveniences that we deal with when we're upgrading and maintaining our infrastructure.
How's Mark gonna deal with that? Not Mark, VRE gonna deal with that?
I think they're terminating in Alexandria.
Do they have a bus
Some.
bridge or anything, or is it just them
I think-
dumping them on the Metro?
There's some movement people to Metro. It's not clear to me that I didn't know that it was necessarily always going to be a disruption, just that those were the periods of time when they could potentially need to stop traffic.
Yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't think it's 5 years. It's going to be shut
It's
down.
gonna be shut down
That whole
between
time,
8 and 1 p.m. But I know there's been a lot of work on the alternatives, but yet I did see that VRE is gonna be stopping some trains at Alexandria. Not all of them, of course.
And so
It's huge. I mean, Long Bridge is, when that gets done, we're gonna see substantial improvements in rail service south of the DC.
we also had the kickoff for the BPRA King Commonwealth Bridges VRE station project, and I think that was in November. You were there. Yeah. So starting soon. So anyway, I'm happy to take any questions about any of this or any other transportation related.
Kind of following up on that, I ride VRE most evenings when I'm in the office, and I've been waiting to see what their new schedule is gonna look like. They haven't released any timetables, at least of how the trains are gonna change, other than sort of follow what the city said. So I just wondered if you had any intel on where VRE is with
Not
that.
yet.
And then I guess also just understanding WMATA sometimes has closed, say, the Yellow Line Bridge to do major track work, and just hoping that they're coordinating and understanding they're gonna be funneling in the morning a lot more riders potentially on their lines, and hopefully they can schedule some of their major construction projects around when the VRE is, when there's still another rail line that comes into DC.
Yeah, I think all the rail agencies are talking.
Okay.
now, trying to figure this out.
Cause that would be really,
Mhm.
really tough. But yeah, and I understand it will be a great result. But thank you, Valerie. We always leave time for other board members who serve on boards, commissions. Matt's got his hand up.
Just a quick note, the Human Rights Commission has been banning about doing some virtual or hybrid meetings, and this month we're gonna do a virtual. And the discussion was, do other boards and commissions do that? And then I chimed in about Dash, how we sort of have hybrid standing. Would we ever consider doing an all virtual meeting?
We've tried to, we try to have our meetings in public, typically for our regular monthly board meetings, just to provide options for one who wants to participate. But we did, you may remember in September, in preparation for the council work session, we actually did an all virtual. meeting,
Yeah.
To accommodate everyone.
But it's something maybe we could schedule once in a while, just to alleviate the traffic.
Yeah, it's something we can talk, I mean, we won't have, City Hall will not be an option any longer. We're actually gonna migrate in January, so it's gonna be interesting to try out some new venues, because apparently, the Del Pepper Center will be hard to schedule because so many of the things that were in City Hall are gonna migrate over there, but, you know, it's something we can take back as we look at our meeting schedule and see if we wanna schedule something that's virtual, but it does seem, I think there are some benefits to us all, you know, most of us being able to be in the room, but that flexibility for those who need to be hybrid, but appreciate the suggestion. I know the Commission on Aging, which I no longer serve on, but while I was still there, was beginning to experiment with more hybrid meetings just to accommodate some of the members who you know, just needed that flexibility, and it did seem to work. It worked pretty well. You know, it was I think helpful to retain more people on the commission, but you know, but there were definitely some things just in terms of getting to know other commissioners that I felt were kind of lost with that, but I appreciate the suggestion.
Yeah, thank you.
So we are outfitting over right next door. Our training room is gonna be where there's a lot of boards and commissions are gonna be meeting there, so it's getting outfitted with all the video and all the equipment, so we are happy to host a dash meeting over there at some point if anybody's interested. We just upgraded our traffic management center, so we could do
Oh, we mean across here?
right over here.
Oh,
Right
okay,
next door.
okay.
That's where everybody in transportation is.
Oh, so you're not moving to like Banker Square or?
No, we moved in the summer.
Oh, you're already over. Oh,
Already
okay.
over there.
Okay,
Mhm.
got it. That's good to know. Anyone else have any updates for the benefit of the group? All right. Move on to our meeting minutes. The November meeting minutes were included in our packet. Are there any corrections or revisions to minutes as they were presented? If not, is there a motion to adopt? So moved. Moved by Jesse. Is there a second? Second, Matt. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Or abstains. Laura abstains. All right.
I have to abstain as well because I wasn't here.
Okay. All right, we're gonna move on to financial reports.
Mr. Chair, as Edward joins us, we don't go over the financial reports in detail. I was just here to ask questions. So if you all have any questions regarding that, and then we would like to jump into the discussion around the line 32 funding discussion. Well, Edward's here at the table, if that's okay with you.
Questions for Edward on the financial reports that were in the back?
Actually, I just had one.
Okay.
Just about the, it's like a variance for overtime. I was just curious what causes that? Is that typical? of
Yeah.
that?
So there is a operations overtime variance. We are seeing higher than budgeted overtime in operations. A lot of that was early in the year. There was a lot of absenteeism related to vacations and other things. And in order to maintain service, we have to have that covered by overtime. It's still somewhat an issue related to absenteeism and some intermittent leave, but it is something that the operations staff is monitoring and trying to kind of make it level to where.
Yeah, I was just curious what had to do with vacancy rates. Sometimes that.
A couple years ago, we had a large overtime overage due to vacancy rates. That is not as much of a contributing factor this fiscal year.
Means vacancy.
Also, we have overtime built into runs within the system, so it's just, there's always gonna be overtime, just the way that the work gets cut. But yeah, so that's also another factor, is there's baseline and then additional beyond.
Right, understood. Yeah, I was just looking at the variance piece for the budget. So, okay, thank you.
Other questions, Rob? All right, now we can move into line 32.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, I'm gonna kick this off, and Edward's been working hard on this matter. I also have a handout that I'm gonna pass around to you. Hopefully, 9 copies, hopefully there's enough. So hand that around to you. In your packet was a summary that Edward put together. It's a memorandum explaining situation that has occurred since we submitted our current services budget, which is that we have learned that the line 32 enhancement that City Council implemented last year at a cost of $240,000 was actually implemented under a one-time funding allocation. which is unusual. We've never had that happen before with service enhancements for Dash. I'll start out by saying, looking back at the meeting and understanding a little bit of the conversation, confirming that it was in fact at the meeting, it's not clear to me exactly what happened as far as misunderstanding what the next steps were or forgetting the next steps. So certainly on our end, own our responsibility as far as following up and understanding what the potential steps needed to be. One of the missed pieces is that there was mention of a desire to have a conversation around this at the fall joint work session. And we all collectively managed to forget that that was needed to happen. So that conversation did not happen. Subsequently, it sat for the better part of since the last budget year up until now. And the issue at hand is that as a one-time funded service, absent of this being funded again as a supplemental, the direction we've received from OMB is that this cannot be included in services. So what that means is that if we want to continue the service, our current services ask increases by another 240,000 plus. Or in what is happening right now, which is that has been pulled out of our current services submittal. Basically, we're not being permitted to submit that as current services. And so we come to this conversation, which is to have a dialogue with you and understand what you as a board would like to see us do in regards to this, what conversations you would like us to have, and what potential solutions you might feel are out there in order for us to solve for this. A service improvement like this does not show meaningful impact until year two, typically, and sometimes it's the latter part of year two. This service has only been operating since August, the end of August for that matter. So the only months we actually have data for are September and October, which I provided in this summary document here. And that data is pretty much useless to us. One, it's an insufficient amount of time to understand the impacts of the improvement of the service. And two, it happened during the federal government shutdown, where Dash has seen a system-wide reduction in ridership. So not only do we not have the right amount of data, the data is simply something that we can't use because it's not representative of the reality of the operating conditions of that service and the people that use it. Nevertheless, we have to submit current services. We have to get through this process. And tonight, later, you will have a discussion around your supplementals letter, which we've agreed to pull out and send as a letter communication to city manager and council about unfunded network improvements. We need to figure out how we might message this and what potential actions you would like us to take as staff and what you might want to do as a board in regards to having these conversations. So there's a full summary, of course, in your packet. Edward's prepared a few slides. The first one here summarizes where that service is, and you can see here on this map that it is a West End improvement to line 32, and it was an off-peak weekday improvement, moving the service from a 60-minute frequency to a 30-minute frequency. As I mentioned, it was funded as one time. It can't be included in the current services budget under the instructions we've been given by OMB. And that we did note in the conversation and in listening and looking back at the conversation, there was mention of asking staff to look into this. It's not really clear what that meant. If that meant city staff, OMB staff, TNES, Dash, et cetera. But nevertheless, it didn't really happen. And absent of that funding, we have to move forward with removing that service as proposed in the budget, which would start July 1. Again, it started in August, late August, and that corresponded with the bid. We can't implement service outside of a bid process. So that was the first opportunity to implement the service. That's why it didn't start July 1. We really need 12 to 18 months of data. And we saw that system ridership overall declined over 4% in the same time period that we're measuring. And line 32 had a steeper decrease of 5.75%. So those are the only three slides we have of that. Again, I've asked Edward to be here at the table for conversation. He can speak to you about the conversations he's had with the city, and I'll open it up and hand it over to you to discuss.
Yeah, I just, before we get into discussion, I did have a chance, because Josh had flagged this for me in the preparation of the agenda and sent me the link to that meeting to watch that section. So I think my takeaways were that some on council, well, Councilman Chapman, who had proposed moving this to one-time savings from WMATA, was interested in potential state revenue that would be coming in both to WMATA and to the local transit systems, maybe in the form of a higher sales tax that the state legislature was working on, that would allow essentially a lot of additional dash service to be funded, and that maybe there would be more clarity on that in a year. I think all the council members who weighed in on this all felt that you can't do this because when I first heard about this, I was like, well, they know better than a 1-year extension makes sense. But all of them understood that this needed to be a permanent change. They were just, I think, trying to figure out what the right revenue source was. And that seemed to be something that could take some of the pressure off the city in, uncertainty and challenging times, revenue wise in their operating budget. So it seems to me like this manager and the council need to understand that if we follow, and we have to follow, barring other instructions, OMB's guidance to remove this, then the council is going to look like they are not being fully supportive of the transit service expansions, because they expand something and talk about the value of Dash, but then it's being taken away, at least in the proposed budget, unless the manager accepts the supplemental. So I feel like, given that OMB seems like something was supposed to happen this fall that didn't, and that's how we got in this situation. I think we need to look at whether the manager wants to treat this differently, because I don't think that council wants to see this basically as something they have to add back later in the spring because of what the message that sends to the community. But the question is kind of how we message that and what our strategy is going to be. But I just wanted to provide, and Josh, is there anything else about your take on the meeting that you want to add to that? But I just wanted to add that additional context as to because I think it's important to understand how we got here.
I think you summarized it well.
And what do we do about it?
So looking ahead slightly in our meeting packet, I see that this is proposed as sort of the lead item in our sort of supplemental and funded lines. And I mean, that strikes me as the most appropriate solution right now, which is to sort of lead with that as the priority task and sort of have it go through the process.
We dropped that in and staff recognizing this and realizing
Yeah.
that maintaining current services is always a
Right.
priority.
I mean, I at the moment I'm struggling to think of like a path besides that, because we certainly have not received grant money specifically for this, right? We when we based our budget, this was not in it, so.
There's no new transit revenue necessarily coming to Alexandria right now. There is the effort around SJ 28, which is a further down the line potential carve out of money from statewide revenues specifically dedicated to funding transit, which was originally targeting WMATA, but ultimately there's a component that will come with us. That's years out if that happens. Sorry to jump in on it, but yeah.
So I wondered if a side conversation with the city manager would be beneficial to kind of bring this up to him to make sure he's remembers the conversation that happened back in May, and the predicament it puts council in, because like we've had several times where we've had to defend service that we've sent up as potential reductions, and we've always gotten it back. And the impression we've gotten is that council didn't really want to, since they're all on record as we want to continue to fund and expand Dash, that sending up small service reductions here and there that are very disruptive to the people who rely on that service is not a great message for the community or where they wanted to spend their time. But yet I think this is where we're going to end up, although I think it's very likely that we're going to get this back since they just funded it a year ago. And to Josh's point, we really don't have a sense of even how successful the service will be because of the limited data and the government shutdown that affected part of that time. So I just wonder if maybe this is something that can be addressed in his budget through flexibility, and in addition to our letter that says very publicly the value of the service. But I know you wanted to wait to talk with us before you engage.
Yes, and we do have, I believe we're confirmed for our budget meeting Tuesday. Tuesday. And so that is a forum under which I would plan to talk about this, because it will be the city manager and deputy city managers. But as you pointed out, that's not a conversation I was going to have prior to having the conversation with the board first. And any perspectives you all had.
Because if the OMB guidance is what holds, then, you know, we're gonna have to do that, but they also need to understand, then we get the DAC involved, we get all the rider stakeholders, and, you know, city council members are the ones we're going to hear from those folks, and have to then explain how that jives with the message of, we wanna add to Dash every year.
Sure.
And, you know, but I think we should give them an opportunity, the city an opportunity to figure out if they want to deal with this separately, because, you know, council's direction was clear that they did ultimately want this to be a permanent, you know, something permanent. They just wanted to look more at funding, you know, funding options, and there may not be any others at this time, given what's available. So they may have to then look to where they normally are funding these services and what savings they're going to be identifying in the budget that's being proposed.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, and we certainly understand why OMB has to do it the way they do, because that was the direction that was given by council when it was funded. Again, it's just hard to decipher exactly what the impact was, even watching that video, to really understand what would have been the steps we could have taken, if any. But,
So I was there at the meeting, and you know, I think this is a very tight budget year. I would not assume that this would get put back in. I mean, it is very tight. There is, if you won't watch council last night, there is a lot of collective bargaining happening. It's very tight. I don't know. I can't imagine many groups getting supplementals that they put in. I mean, folks can advocate as they want, but I also think when council puts in something as a one-time addition, they have to understand that there's a good chance that it's going to come out. I mean, they were aware of the budget situation, that we did not think it was going to be getting better for Alexandria. I mean, even in May, when they were having these discussions, we thought it was going to be great for FY27. And so that was a decision that they made, knowing that. I mean, they can direct staff to look for other funding, but they made a decision to make a one-time addition. And I would not assume that it's coming back. I think, you know, it's unfortunate that it kind of came through that way, and then we weren't able to get it in till August, and you only have a couple months, and the data is not great. But also there's a lot of development coming on Eisenhower in a couple years, and Landmark, and the connection that it's making to the West End Alexandria is going to, you know, in a couple of years, there's going to be a lot more people. And I just wonder if that is going to be a better time to really advocate for the increases in service on this particular route versus having that battle now when there is no money to spread around.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, I do remember, because I have watched me very recently, Councilman McPike saying we should be adding to CERT Dash every year. And again, I look at that and I say, well, then how are you going to reconcile that with what may happen here? And that's just their decisions that they have to make, because they can pull from other parts of the budget. As Josh and I also had discussed, I mean, whether we wanted to advocate a policy that council never fund Dash service out of 1 year savings, basically, and say, look, you know, if you can't identify a more sustainable source of revenue, you know, then funding source, then we shouldn't be doing these, because we might have the potential of next summer of basically going back to 60 minutes on that portion of the route if we're not successful. And so maybe that's something we need to either put in this letter, or we need to send a separate communication to council on basically asking that they essentially delay funding, delay improvements until they can come up with a way to ensure that they are sustainable, because of the disruption that has on people who take jobs based on, oh, I can make this trip and the commute is manageable, or I sign a lease on an apartment, or I buy a condo, you know, and it's really unfortunate. And that's sometimes why I think people prefer things like rail, that's heavy infrastructure, where, you know, they've spent so much money, of course they're going to continue to run it. And you know, I don't like I don't like seeing it because I know that this is not something that makes sense, and that it makes sense to do it even this year then and to have it go away. I mean, that, you know, we're not really creating the economic development that we are supposed to be seeing from these, but so maybe that's something we can put in either this letter or something that we need to have a separate conversation with council about. Does this letter go to both council and manager? Or is this the letter we're going to talk about?
I think that was the intention. I mean, and I would add, Mr. Chair, that this board ultimately has the authority at the end of the day, when the budget comes back and the decisions are made throughout the budget process, to reassess if there is a reduction. For example, let's just say that it's 240,000. Everything else is funded, 240,000 is pulled out. You can direct us as staff to look at alternatives and bring back scenarios of reductions of service that can be made elsewhere, or reprioritization of service in some way, shape, or form. So I do want to share that while it feels very difficult to figure out what to do, if you unify your position of where you want to stand on this and how you want to communicate it, and the process moves through, at the end of the day, if the process moves through, I'm not saying that this wouldn't be the thing to cut, but it doesn't mean this is the thing you have to cut. It just means that we have to resolve that $240,000 deficit within the budget in some way, shape, or form. So it would be helpful as time goes on for you all to think about where you feel the priority should be for us as staff, so we can start looking at separately from this messaging that we certainly be a part of. And I saw Arisha's hand go up on the screen.
Yeah, Josh, thanks. I think you kind of answered it, well, in part. I think the answer is probably that it's too early, because I was just wondering if there's right now kind of a finger in the air read on what happens if the funding isn't achieved, given what seems like an outsized impact on ridership from this particular line or this particular service. Do you think the answer would be to cut service elsewhere? I think just based on what you were saying right now, it's probably just too early to tell, and there's a lot of different alternatives available. Okay. Yep.
In the letter, which this sort of leads into, I know in the past, I think last time we had been the service reduction, we had talked about over a certain number of years how much in non-service reductions we had absorbed and why we were at the end of what we could do on that. I think it's important we put that in the letter to remind of that, because I feel like the letter probably has to be more about, given especially what Hillary said about, well, don't assume you're going to get this back even with sustained advocacy. We probably need to then move off the other improvements that were requested supplementals and kind of make it about primarily this and holding on to current services and explaining why we are going to have to dip into service if we don't get any. Because there was even some discussion at the meeting about, well, Dash could look at the rest of their budget and absorb this. I think we have to be ready to address what we've done in the past as to, and so I'd like to see if we can add that into this communication.
Certainly, we can do that.
So we don't need to we need to vote on sending the letter. We don't need to vote on the line 32 position, but it's part of the letter, is that?
Yeah, I think two things are helpful. One is just your feedback, so we've heard you on your perspectives and takes on this. Secondly is to decide what you want to do with the letter that addresses the unfunded network improvements and supplementals. And so I think if you want to skip to that in the agenda, that's fine. And we're just going to take notes of the things that you want changed in that letter, or if you just want us to talk about line 32, talk about the importance of maintaining that, realizing that the budget is tight, that there are no opportunity for the other improvements, mention that the other improvements exist for the future, but we recognize they're probably not possible at this point. And then talk about administrative reductions that we've taken over the course of the years and how we've pretty much run out of options to fund something like service out of some other reduction internally to Dash at this point.
I think for me, that makes sense because line 32 seems duplicate of the new line that's going to be launched with Lamada on Sunday, the 15th, the 8/29. It's going to service that route, which, given it is a tight budget year, focusing on giving a free option for our riders within the city limits makes sense, and focusing on that increase. But I think council will also look at that. So we have this Lamada new line. That's good, a duplication of this.
Okay. Is that peak period, or Hillary, is that peak period service, or is
I
that
think it's peak period.
okay?
but it's still service, but I still think we need to have a free option
Okay.
for riders along that corridor.
And our enhancement was, because it's already 30 minutes across the entire route peak, the 30 minutes was the off-peak weekday enhancement, so it may not
off-peak?
coincide with
Yeah,
that.
this is just off.
Oh, my bad. I thought it was
I think
throughout the whole day.
it's just midday, or is it even evening, or is it just midday?
It just says off peak. I'm not sure.
I think it's midday
But
and
that also includes
evenings, yeah,
Evenings, yeah.
but just weekday,
Yeah.
midday and evening.
And that route, the 829 is Van Dorn to, does it go into DC?
Goes in
Okay.
Metro Center,
Okay,
but it stops at the Weston Transit Center.
okay. So it's something, but it is very restricted in terms of the hours that route
It'll
will.
be rush hour.
Okay. But I do think to your point, yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about equity between what Dash and Wilmata service because of the fare, and I think that is important to mention. You know, we are free service in a community that's been identified as a place of need for that. I would, because I think we always get asked for our service enhancement chart and the equity scores that come with that. So I would certainly have that as an attachment to this letter and to say, here are the other, so this is just anticipating that question. But I do think it seems, given what we know about the budget, that it's important to talk about maintaining this improvement, and then the perhaps our policy request on how they do fund service in the future, because I think we have to talk with them.
Would you like us to include this, even though this is rough data? But it does sort of explain the issue. It's up to you all. Feel like it's necessary.
So that's, yes, for what it's worth, my 2 cents is I think this was great for us to see tonight. I'm not sure that I would include it in the letter because I think it simultaneously duplicates a lot of the information, but then adds additional stuff that doesn't drive further clarity, right? And to your point, I think showing data that we know is not usable might just, if you just glance at the chart, it's actually countering the argument you're trying to make. I mean, my just top on take, I think the letter's great. I think we should copy the city council at the same time, even though it's going to the city manager. I think everyone having information is helpful. And I think the strength of this letter is that it is presenting a bunch of options for policymakers, right? I think the fact that we're going to look at this and sort of see in context the various unfunded routes, but also how much all of them cost, I think is the kind of information that they need for the process that they're going through, regardless of the outcome of that process.
Is it safe to say that we as staff can take these notes, fine tune the letter as is drafted, get it to you, Mr. Chair, to sign, and then get that submitted? Is that,
You have a hard deadline on submitting it.
I don't know, there's a hard deadline, but
I think it should be before your meeting next week. Like they should have this before the budget meeting.
sure, yeah.
Okay.
That would be helpful for us.
Why don't we use the correspondence, Paul, which would have Jesse and me as to circulate to the board, have Jesse and I vet any changes that you all have, and then we can sign off on it. I think we can turn that around quick. Time for your meeting.
Yeah, we can work on it
What
tomorrow.
day is it? Do you remember what date your meeting is?
Tuesday, the 16th.
Okay. Yeah.
So as long as we have it out by Monday morning, we're probably fine.
Okay, I think Jesse and I could probably turn around in a day.
Okay.
Any changes to the board, but I would like to just give folks a brief opportunity, the whole board opportunity, just to review it. Especially because it's going to be very different. Let's hear now, just make sure we've captured this.
Okay, well, we'll do that.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you want us to jump into?
Yeah.
So we talked about.
Yeah, I was trying to get back to the agenda.
Yeah. So 4B through 4E are our annual grant applications, and Edward's going to summarize those for you because there's a new approach that we're taking this year. These are the grants that go into the Department of Rail and Public Transportation and are due no later than February 1st. So I'll turn it over to you, Edward.
Thank you. Yes, so the packet includes a memo that kind of goes into all three of the applications that Dash is intending to pursue directly in detail. Basically, we're going after the Workforce Development Grant with DRPT. This is a program that we've utilized several years. This past cycle, we got 2 apprenticeships out of it, and previous cycles we've gone for internships. This application leaves it open, but we're leaning towards one intern, one apprentice in the FY 27 cycle. The other two grants are for the DRPT merit program. And this is where we're kind of taking a new approach to things. The first one is merit state of good repair for our non-revenue vehicles. So these are our relief fleet or support vehicles, essentially our non-buses. In the past, we had funded those directly out of the capital outlay of our operating budget, which is about 190K. By utilizing the merit program, we can leverage the value of the dollar further. That has a 32% local match, whereas 68% state match. So previously we hadn't pursued this as an option because we didn't know that we could go directly after this type of funding as Dash. But this essentially will allow us to get to maintain our non-revenue vehicle fleet in a state of good repair and get more value per the dollar. Likewise, the other one is state of good repair non-vehicle facility replacements. Again, a lot of these things were things that we funded directly through our operating budget and the capital outlay. But this would allow us to leverage that 68% state funding with a 32% local match. And this is intended to cover things that are part of the facility that are not the responsibility of the Department of General Services. They own the building, but there are a lot of things related to the facility that are the responsibility of Dash. Some of the examples that we have in the memo are like the bus chassis wash that needs replacement, and then security gates, those types of things. Large capital investments, but they are the responsibility of Dash to maintain. So by going after this merit state of good repair funding, we can leverage that capital outlay to make that go further and address some of the needed repairs of the facility.
Any questions for Edward on the grant applications?
Motion to approve.
I think Hillary
I
had
have
a
a
question.
question.
Yeah.
So for the non-revenue vehicles, that match is coming out of your existing fleet fund that you have, you're just leveraging that.
Correct.
So the match is covered with existing
You'd be
current
using
services dollars.
correct, yeah.
Within your operating budget.
Within our operating budget,
Same with the other one.
the facility.
We have that small capital line item that is used throughout the year. And the other thing that we've often experienced is that because of failures of equipment and other aspects of the building that have happened most recently, because the building is sort of reaching half-life, we've had to spend that money in other places, and it's caused our non-revenue vehicle fleet to fall behind. And those assets are owned by Dash, they're ATC vehicles. And so looking to find a way to catch up on that state of good repair then sets us up for future years to have much less pressure to try to catch up and find funds to buy a bunch of vehicles. And the other thing is inflationary cost of these vehicles has just affected that budget, so.
So we can go for these every year now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Any other questions?
Same question, but on the workforce one.
Yes.
Is the match, is that sort of in addition to budgeted labor, or is that?
That would be, we do have in our operating budget, we have a local grant match line item. So it's not utilizing the capital outlay, but it is already captured within our operating budget.
We've been pretty successful at that every year. We've had interns, I think, for as long as I've been here, that have been funded through that program. So we've established a pretty good base of money within our operating budget to cover that match.
There's no further discussion. Is there a motion? We can adopt these as a block if the board's amenable. So move my comments. Is there a second?
Second.
Second part, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? Carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Keep going. I know I got a lot of stuff. Sorry, I'm just talking a lot tonight. The next item, 5A, Mr. Chair, you and I had spoken a little bit about the work that I have done with Mary Gale and internally with the team to do a long overdue rework of the board policies that I think frankly haven't been looked at since the organization started. I have those ready. I'm asking that the boards form a committee, preferably a 2-person committee that could sit down with myself and Mary Gale and any of my staff members to review the proposed policies, to provide input into any adjustments to those and anything we might be missing. Think about these as policies of how the board conducts itself and what the responsibilities are of the board, where that's not addressed in the bylaws, is much of what this talks about and the various roles. So there's a lot of policy work around that. So that's my ask, is for you all to consider appointing a committee to help work on that so that we could bring it back to the board potentially as early as the next meeting.
I are happy to volunteer.
Arish knows he's being voluntold.
Texted me.
Yep.
Okay, all right, to talk about it, that's great. And I had, actually,
They're going for the most active committee of the day. Didn't you guys just do another committee?
Bi-coastal, yeah.
it'll be in next year's accomplishment room, right? So, but, I did want, and I had talked with Josh about even one additional policy that probably won't be in this date, but that I'd like us to memorialize how we do board recruitments, and I think that's important to include in that handbook. But that can come later, and understand that this is a document that, because it will now be fresh, we can update it as there are need to add things, and it'll make sense. It'll be something that we actually look at as opposed to the document the way it was, which I think was like all the organizational policies in 1984, but then those were separated as the organization grew more complicated, just they weren't updated here. That's for the
many of the policies that exist today read as operating board policies as if you're operating the organization on a day-to-day basis. And I think that comes from the time when the organization was set up, the board was in operations, it was so small. So we just wiped the slate clean, and Mary Gale did a great job of bringing a lot of the policies that she's seen on other boards. And so you're not going to see a rework of the current documents, you're going to see a brand new. So that's a lot easier to work through than it is to try to sort out all that old stuff.
Great. Well, thank you both for volunteering.
Okay, I will ask Ray to come to the table just to support me in this conversation. That can run through a summary of the joint work session and the white paper that we provided you all, or the Q&A paper, so to say, that we provided you all in the board packet. I want to give credit to the team for working very hard to make sure we tried to capture everything that was discussed in that joint work session, to provide both a restating the question that we saw from you or from City Council, and providing as comprehensive an answer as possible. Mr. Chair, you pointed out to me we missed one, so we know we're going to tackle that for you, which was around the difference in new bus hybrid technologies compared to the hybrids that we have that are 12 years old. So we are going to work on that and get that built in to a final document for you all. I want to talk briefly about the next steps as we understand them.
Hey, Josh,
Sure.
before you move on, the answer that Adele and I posed wasn't really answered. The question we had on the cost comparison between electric and diesel fuel in number 5 here.
Okay, so would it be okay for me to summarize just
Yeah,
where I think we're going with this, and then let's talk about the individual questions? Is that okay?
Well, yeah, oh, sure, that's fine.
Yeah, you're gonna have to bring this back anyway, because we've identified now 2 areas for follow-up before this document is final and goes to the.
That's right.
As well.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
But we can talk.
We should know, but we need to note there are, the things that happen.
Yeah, what I just want to make sure is sort of we're all aligned on where we go with this.
Sure.
First, so, okay, so again, want to talk about the next steps of what we think we're going to use this information to do, any outstanding points to note, and the takeaways that we had. So we took away from that conversation of the joint bodies that there was general agreement that current services and state of good repair are the highest priorities for our organization and for our service. We heard that throughout the conversation, and we recognize that as a key priority from the joint work session. there was extensive discussion around zero emission buses and zero emission goals. And the general consensus that we got was that there was an interest in, again, current services, state of good repair, and then service enhancement, service growth over zero emissions, but not wanting to abandon the zero emission as a goal. We also took away that zero emission goals need to be more flexible to accommodate the realities of funding, infrastructure, and other constraints. And that both entities are fully behind supporting zero emission conversion as every opportunity presents itself. Those were some takeaways that we had from the conversation. What we see as the next steps, we can step through the Q&A document a little bit and make sure we provided clarification or come back with corrected answers for you, is that this document that we provided you and the summary of that conversation as we understood it is going to inform our ability to then take a look at, open up the board strategic plan, which we've been wanting to get back to as staff, to redraft some of those goals, to talk with you about that in the coming meeting or two. And then also to look at adjusting and providing updates to you. Both of these require your approval. Both of these would be actively involving you, which is to adjust or restate the zero emissions transition plan, update that, and provide any additional elements that need to be done within that document. And then new, and I think important that I wanted to make sure I conveyed, is that I'm looking at this to help us inform an annual work plan. So the goal getting to a point where we understand from you as a board what the strategic plan is, what are your priorities, making sure we go through all of this together, and then that we develop an annual work plan. And that annual work plan can be something by which I'm evaluated against with the board, that we as an organization are evaluated against and can report back on publicly and to you. We haven't had an annual work plan really, but the idea being that the strategic plan is something that's sort of stays in effect multiple years, and we provide a few updates regarding to that, but that really is what's going to inform the work that we're doing and where we are putting our staff resources. I would note that staff resources within this organization are tight and limited. And so we want to make sure that we're using them in the most efficient and effective way. And that joint work session was very helpful in helping us to understand where we should put some of those priorities. We're proposing that when we bring back the zero emission bus transition plan, we evaluate that target year and have a conversation with you around what that is, incorporating the partial zero emissions or low emissions technologies in intermediate step. And we're going to have a conversation about that in a moment, as well as it relates to the low NOAA award that we received. And to also ensure that we're fully utilizing the current zero emissions infrastructure that we have received. A big theme around what we heard in the conversation was, how are you compared to peer agencies? How are you leveraging people who are doing this better than us? What are they doing differently? And what are some potential approaches that we could take that might mimic what those organizations are doing? There were some specific examples given to us. There were some specific questions issued, but we also took a moment to step back and provide you with an understanding of how Dash is navigating this within the world of transit nationally. So we gave you some evaluations here relative to some peer organizations. Most similar to us being within Virginia here is Blacksburg Transit. They actually are just slightly ahead of us. Unfortunately, I saw a picture, they're putting up their en route charger, and I texted Ray and I said, darn it, they got ahead of us. And he said, well, is it turned on yet? I said, well, it's in the ground and it's up, so I don't know. But nonetheless, we have a close working relationship with them. It's obviously my alma mater. So we can gain a lot of understanding from them, what they're doing. The thing to note about them that differs from us is that they are the only recipient of federal formula funds in their area. And so they are able to leverage federal formula funds to move these projects forward, along with state funds, along with discretionary programs. And the university, and I know this just because of my connection there, the university pays 100% of their local match for their capital and operating. And in many ways, that payment is representative of the university's priorities in what the transit system is doing. Mountain Line is another example that we've used. They've been ahead of us in regards to their implementation of electrification. They have been very, very successful at winning Lono grants. There really isn't anyone else in Montana doing Lono. And because of the way those programs are set up, discretionary grants, they try to spread the pot, but they try to spread them within the state too. There's a lot of things happening differently out there, out west, and how they are leveraging federal and funds. And then another example that I think this was brought up during the joint work session, which is Transmilenio. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And they are way, way ahead of us, but we're going to talk a little bit about how they are able to do it a lot differently because they don't have the federal requirements that we have here in the United States. We don't have those federal requirements when it comes to state and local money, but historically we've gotten very little state and local money. There's actually no local money going into electrification of our fleet as it stands today. So what we're using to date has been federal dollars, which are very restrictive. What have we been using for funding? So there was a lot of questions around this. What have we been leveraging? So from a state perspective, there's merit, which we talked about a little bit earlier in this meeting. NVTA 70% funds bring a lot of money to Dash as far as our operation is concerned. Our first set of electric buses was using the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Fund, which is largely depleted at this point. We have a number of smart scale projects that we've been successful in receiving, but smart scale is an expansion funding. It is not a stated good repair funding. So that has a lot of implications in what we can use it for. Commuter choice, as you mentioned in your summary, we got 2 electric 60-foot buses out of commuter choice. We've leveraged that. And of course, CMAQ and RSTP funds are options as well. On the federal side, we really only have Lono. That's all that we can do. Bus and bus facilities is another component, but we've been less successful in that. Most US transit agencies are using those federal formula funds, which we don't have access to. They're combining those with discretionary grants and local matching funds, as I mentioned earlier with the example of Blacksburg Transit. That's really what they're doing, and they're getting a lot of local funds. They're getting a lot of those federal funds and state funds. So that is an issue that we run into that is unique for us and differs from most public transit providers in the country. From a prioritization shift, discussion around Lono, and we mentioned this earlier when we made our application, our sort of Hail Mary pass application to the current administration. There's $1.6 billion out there in Lono, but absolutely zero of those dollars was used to fund fully electric vehicles, and that includes us. But we did confirm prior to this meeting that the 10.9 million we received was for 12 diesel hybrid electric buses. There's a footnote there that's funding only the delta of the the hybrid cost of that bus. And there are some other complexities around how they awarded this. I will just summarize by saying we're very thankful for that money. We're really happy we got it. But it's going to be a challenge for us to figure out exactly how to execute on it. But nonetheless, that's the reason we were awarded that, because they were not fully electric, but they are the new hybrid electric buses that have a much different technology than the ones we operate today. And of course, we had the 2023 $24 million in Lono that was awarded to us. All said, all in, we have secured over $45 million in funding for 20 battery electric buses, 13 Devo chargers, 1 on-route opportunity charger, and the facility expansion that we are broken ground on recently. So I think it's important to highlight that to our stakeholders, to say there has been a substantial amount of money that we have secured towards these efforts. It's not that we have not been successful, but we have been as successful as we can within the limited options that we can tap into. So I think that's an important element. From a collaborations perspective, we wanted to illustrate just how much collaboration we are doing throughout the country. These are all the entities which we have partnered with, over 25 of them, including transportation agencies, firms, and organizations. and that includes George Mason University. I can say that the team here, Raymond and others, have actually traveled to a number of these locations, sat down and had conversations with them to understand how are you doing this? What are your successes? What are the funding mechanisms you're using and so forth? But we heard a lot of questions around what have you been doing? How have you been actively working on this? And so we thought it was helpful to kind of sit down and put the pins on the wall and say, well, gee, who have we been talking to and where have we been going with this? So we're excited about that. And then wrapping up here, I just wanted to cover the takeaways that again, as I mentioned before, I want to step through those Q&As with you, understand any variances that we might have missed, some things that might require additional clarification. I want to hear from you all as a group. Are we right? Does it make sense what we're talking about? And are these the right path for us to take as staff? Understand that the discussion tonight is not your final decision on this. It is really to say to us, yes, you're on the right track, continue, and make sure you bring back to us X, Y, and Z. And how we ensure that we're aligned both with the board and city council and the city leadership in how we're approaching this, and anything else that we might want to tackle. At the end of the day, we know that Dash service is an effective, majorly effective component of our community, both in providing access and resources and economic development, but in helping to reduce the carbon footprint of our community. Everybody we get on transit gets them out of those single occupancy vehicles and has an impact. So we're very proud of that. So thank you for letting me kind of get through that. I want to open it up to questions. I just didn't want to pause and continue, but I know Matt, I think we'll start with you and then Arish has his hand up. But
yeah, on page 13, I think is question and response 5. And it's just not responsive.
Okay.
Of course, we can find it. Do you have it up?
I'm pulling it up right now.
Question 5 on page 12 is what I think you're.
Page 12. So the second part, and how do their costs compare with the costs of diesel fuel? That part isn't answered.
So I think what might be helpful is if you can kind of restate what is the question and
So the question was, and it's always been for years, what's the per mile cost electricity versus diesel? And is Dominion what are they giving us their best rate?
Yeah.
That was the part I've always been concerned about, because I heard the more we use, the higher the rates go, which is actually asinine. It should be the other way around. If we're a bulk buyer, we should get better rates.
Yeah, I'll let Ray jump in and talk a little bit about this, but in the conversations I've had, I've heard, first of all, we're under the city's overall platform. I have not heard that our rates go higher the more we use, but that may be.
That came from this table, maybe years ago.
Yeah.
Jim Capps was on here. And it's been a sort of a burning question ever since. But is the city covering our electric rate or cost no matter what?
Yeah, our electric is paid via transfer within the city, right?
Yeah, it's the electric bill is paid by the city and then transferred to us. So
is it itemized? It's itemized by our.
It is a separate
consumption.
Yeah, there's a separate meter for this bill.
And that includes all of our charging stations for the bus, not just the building. So
yeah, all electricity on this.
Yeah, and I'm Josh, at one point I remember you saying if we had a full fleet, it would be the same amount of electricity that the Empire State Building uses. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember when we first started.
So the question
learned a lot since
comes down to what is our rate? That's all I want to know. Compare per mile compared to diesel, and then are we getting a good rate? And I think Abdel, Councilman Anubi, sort of wants the same answer.
So I think the other piece, so aside from answering the question about what is the rate we're getting for electricity, candidly, we have a lot of work to do yet in understanding the per mile cost of these vehicles. And there's a couple of aspects that have been a challenge for us. The biggest one has been weakness around our data. And that is a combination of factors. One has been charge management implementation and being able to, in the same way that we understand diesel fuel consumption, and that is piped directly into our fleet maintenance, platform. We don't have that coming yet from the electric side. And I know that Ray and the team have been working on that. But I think the other thing is that we have been chipping away from a maintenance perspective on how we make sure the data that's going into our system is full and complete. And I want to give a nod to John, who's back here. He's only been on with a couple of months. He's doing great things to help us try to get there. But we don't have a lot of reliable data to really go into truly being able to say this is the exact cost. Now Stephanie is sick, home with a fever. She did have a maintenance presentation. She's going to come back next month, and she does have some high level data to understand the operating cost of the vehicles as a whole. But when it comes down to that exact comparison of diesel consumption versus electricity consumption, we're still behind the ball on that. And it's priority.
Let me just go one better and then I'll stop. I mean, we know maintenance costs for electric is less. Even if we took the.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily?
No.
Okay, but there are fewer parts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Conceptually, they are less.
Okay.
In
I mean,
practice, we haven't quite
if
seen
we
that.
want to sell the city on electric buses, and we probably all do around this table, it'd be great to show, demonstrate that there's a cost advantage to moving over to electricity faster than, what they envision. And that would be a good sell, and, not to mention all the other ancillary cleaner air and everything else.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think that is where we're trying to get. It just candidly has been very hard to get there, much more so than we would think it should be. But I can also tell you that our observations from a high level, from a reliability perspective and a cost perspective, the electric buses have been substantially less reliable and more expensive to maintain. That really, I think, is not so much from the concept of electric vehicles and how electric vehicles should be less expensive to operate. It's more about the manufacturers of those vehicles and the reliability that has come from them. And I will just say, we just got back from a visit to outside of San Francisco. I joined the team at another plant, Gillig, who we've never bought electric buses from, and we've heard great things about. And we've got a bunch of their buses coming that are electric, and we're going to start to hopefully see a change in that reliability issue. But between Proterra going out of business, those buses turning into heavy paperweights, we actually have one that's mechanically totaled, unrepairable, and then New Flyer, who has done their best, but we have had nothing but problems in the process of manufacturing, and we're now under a battery recall. They're switching out batteries. We've had a lot of these sort of stumbling blocks, I think, that I don't think truly tell the true story, because in my opinion, you're right. And I think we've always said that there are less moving parts. An electric motor is far more reliable than a combustion motor, and we want to see that improvement. But the challenge has not so much been around that electric propulsion motor, it's been around everything else. And that, I think that's making it hard to paint that picture clearly. But I'm not saying that I don't want to get you an answer. I'm just trying to maybe help you understand why it's harder for us to answer that in the right, clearest way.
Thank you.
Did I skip a reach? I'm sorry.
I'm good, Josh. Thanks. Appreciate it.
So, I mean, I think the main comment I want to make is just to recognize that this white paper is a very impressive document, right? Like council and this board asked you guys for substantive feedback on a lot of things, and seeing it all laid out like this is really impressive, and I want to give you guys credit for that. Just a couple very minor kind of things I'm noticing. The questions that are in parens indicating who asked them, the ones that don't have an indication, are those questions that you guys came up on your own because you thought they'd just be an interesting way to move this dialogue forward? Were they submitted after the fact? What's the difference between questions that are tagged to a certain asker and the ones that are not?
I'll respond.
I'll let Ray talk.
I'm trying to find an example. A lot of those questions, I think, stem from overall discussions of the group.
Just they drew out of the things that were being mentioned in the dialogue, but were not just like a specific question.
Correct. There wasn't a specific question asked by a specific person.
The theme of the conversation.
Got it. Great. One very small formatting thing to consider before you make this final is you're referring to council members by last name, but dashboard members by first name. So you might just want to pick a standard and use it. And if we stick with first names, I don't have an I in Jesse. No, not, I don't really have any other, sort of like specific questions on the content, having had the chance to look through. I think this is a really valuable document. Like, you guys really cover a lot here, and move this dialogue forward. I think the section that jumped out at me as kind of being really the meat of this was the very lengthy response to the, question that Councilmember Bagley asked about what's the trade-off between going fully electric versus expanding service. And I think to see the apples to apples comparison about costs, about levels of decarbonization, I think was really helpful as we consider how we respond to all this. And then just Josh, you asked for reflections on, and certainly I share the way that you guys landed on kind of where were things left in terms of the overall goals and priorities, as you guys presented them here in the slideshow that tracked with my takeaways from the meeting.
Other questions, comments?
I know you got a question. Go for it, Arish.
Praveen.
I mean, sorry, Praveen. I was still thinking Arish needed to go, but
So I want to echo what Jesse said. Like, I can tell this took a lot of work, and we appreciate it. I know you got a lot thrown at you in that meeting and before it and after. So thanks for addressing that. A couple questions I have. One is there's a statement in here that said the total cost to own a battery electric bus is more similar to that of a diesel bus than its upfront costs indicate. And that when you actually, it was like in a different response than where you kind of laid out the total and annual costs. And I'd like to understand that discrepancy a bit.
Can you help me find where that statement is when you're reading that?
Sure.
It might be in the section that I just mentioned.
So page 7 of this response, which is an answer to question number 3. So actually, yeah, it's in the same answer as where you go through the emissions reduction and like the 200 million versus the 120 million, which is 16 and a half in versus 10 annually. So are the total costs similar, or are they far apart?
So this is something that we had a consultant assist us with computing these numbers and provide this assessment. So I might need to, if it might be best for me to circle back around and double check the assumptions of what went behind this assessment.
Okay.
And if it works for you, you could provide us follow up, either confirming or adjusting them.
Yeah, I think the details behind the calculation, because kind of to Matt's question, it's Josh's answer. If we don't know how much electric fuel costs per mile, how can you make that assessment of total costs?
Again, the first half, the first half of the sentence is a simple statement that electric buses are more expensive than diesel buses, right?
Upfront.
Right, that's what it says, yeah. It says while electric fleets have higher upfront costs, no, the second half says fuel costs are significantly lower. That sentence is not dealing with total costs. It says electric fleets have higher upfront costs, fuel costs are significantly lower. I think that that sentence is fairly straightforward. So at the top of page 7, the very first sentence.
So I'm talking about on page 7, the last sentence in the first paragraph. So considering upfront capital costs, lifetime fuel costs, and maintenance costs, the total cost to own a battery electric bus is more similar to that of a diesel bus than its upfront costs indicate.
Got it. I thought you were asking about the
Is
first
that
one.
true?
Yeah.
Does the Dash team agree with that?
I believe this, so this speaks in concept. This doesn't dive into specific real life TCO, total cost of ownership assessment. So I believe the statement just is, the point of this statement is trying to make that although it costs more to buy a battery electric bus in front, the ongoing operational cost savings offsets it over the total lifetime of the bus, where it essentially kind of more or less levels out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think we should dig into that a little bit more for you. I think it's a good point. Um, I mean, I think the message I've often been hearing is that the failures on the buses, outside of the failures of, for example, a diesel emission system, which is a common problem we have on diesels. Um, the rest of the bus is fundamentally the same, right? And so I just thinking, not being the one who, I'm not the expert on this, so not being the one who came up with this answer. But I think you asked the question of what's Dash's experience in regards to sort of how these buses perform. The electric buses spend more time down because of faults and chasing issues, battery strings, they're very, very sensitive, understandably so. A diesel bus goes down, it's quick fix and it's out the door. That downtime and the amount of energy that's put into diagnosing and getting that vehicle back on the road is surprisingly high, in my experience. Frankly, having been someone who owned an electric car, like I don't know why that's happening with buses, but it is. And so, the lifetime cost of ownership piece, I'm also very interested in understanding the answer to that question. And admittedly, it's frustrating that we haven't really been able to get there. I think we're on the right track to get there. But you have an expensive upfront cost. And you potentially have lower operating costs from the perspective of electricity and all those kinds of things. Understanding sort of how those balance out in the long term and sort of what the downtime versus the actual parts cost versus the energy costs, I think are maybe a factors going in there. But you live in this world more than I do. I mean, what's your perspective of this?
So in a world that doesn't exist yet, where the reliability of battery electric buses is more or less on par with a conventional bus, and the industry is stable, we know how to take care of it, the industry knows how to take care of it, and when something goes down, it doesn't take us months to get that bus back online. Conceptually, yes, the ongoing total cost of ownership does level out. Where we are now is we haven't reached equilibrium. The technology hasn't matured to the point where it's considered 100% reliable, 100% solid. We're seeing recalls on a monthly basis that takes these buses down for weeks, months at a time. That tracks down our SOC usage abilities by 20, 30%. That's causing us to revisit our fleet strategy and to diversify options. Those things are still happening. We're not yet at a point, the industry is not yet at a point where, at least here in this country, where we operate a 70, 80% fleet of battery electric buses reliably, and the ongoing cost is reduced to minimally, reduce that to just the preventive maintenance, as it is on the diesel side, whereas it is on the CNG or CNG or diesel side. So I think that is what is where our reality is living right now, is that in concept, yes, that would make sense, but we are still in a point where we're still in the infancy stages of the technology, and we're dealing with growing pains of figuring out how to walk with this technology.
Okay, so I think you guys answered like 5 questions I didn't ask, but just to kind of land it, is that statement is in concept.
Mhm.
It's not a reality that the Dash team agrees with.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So then in the 200 million total cost to electrify the Dash fleet, that's a confusing way to look at it. Is that assuming you do a full fleet replacement overnight?
That
Like
is,
you buy 100 buses tomorrow? Is that what's $200 million?
$200 million would be to convert the entire fleet, which is a 12-year. We're talking about 12
So
years
that's
worth of
200 million over 12 years.
Correct.
Okay, it's not like 200 million would be the cost to buy 100 electric buses tomorrow. Okay. So, but that's compared against the total cost to maintain Dash's current fleet at diesel buses would be 120 million.
So
It's, without any detail behind these numbers, it's like really hard to tell if these are like apples to apples comparisons. So maybe I can make that a shorter discussion and say I'd really like to see the analysis behind this, because the way it's presented right here, like it's hard to tell if these are real numbers, and I'd like to understand the assumptions that are behind.
So it sounds like you would like some additional context behind what this, what's behind these numbers.
Yeah, we can do that. Great.
I'll echo the comments of others. Thank you for putting this together, and look forward to kind of seeing as the product is refined, but I think it really helps us understand, you know, the decision points that we have to make, and a lot of the factors and things that we've learned from our experience, both at Dash and then from our peer agencies. And that is part especially interesting.
Thank you, thank you. So to confirm what we're gonna do next, we're gonna tie up these loose ends, get you some of those details that you've asked for, help to get a better answer to your question, Matt, and Chair Kaplan, to incorporate your question around the hybrid technology, the difference today versus the past. So we'll clean that up, we'll finalize that information. We probably won't bring it back to you as a board, instead we'll just circulate it via email. And certainly please feel free to reach out and say, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you all and sit down a little bit more. And certainly for folks who are more involved in the industry like yourself, Praveen, that might see some value of adding some additional remarks in there to make sure when it goes to council, it really is a polished product and easy to read and understand. I think those are all great things. Outside of that, again, what you can expect is that the team is going to sit down and reevaluate the strategic plan now, update that. We're not going to throw it out. We're going to update it, bring that back to you. And then once we hear from you on that, then we'll move forward in the process of the work plan. And my target would be to have that work plan come next year, next fiscal year. So that would be something we'd sit down and go over with you in the fall, and that would give us an understanding of how we were going to move forward. Does that sound good, everybody? Great, thank you. Thanks, Ray. All right, so I finally get to introduce to you a new team member at Dash, who is here tonight, and someone who you will hear a lot from in the future, as you've heard from this position quite often in the past. And that is Stevie Matthews, who's here in the audience, has joined us as Director of Planning and Scheduling. She comes with over 13 years of public transit planning and scheduling experience. She's led transit network redesigns, long-range planning, technology implementation, and service scheduling efforts. She most recently joined us from AE or AECOM. How do you say AE? A little of both. But the vast majority of her career has been with public transit agencies, where she's held leadership positions in planning and scheduling. I understand it was Pittsburgh. You were in Pittsburgh. So I'm going to ask her to come up. She's originally Floridian, but spent many years in Pennsylvania, and you consider yourself a Steelers fan. So grab a seat. And I understand has a 5-year-old Australian Shepherd named Echo. Yeah. But I asked Stevie to just come just give you all just an overview of herself and to hear any of your questions you might have. Because as you know, this particular role in our organization works very closely with the board on many of our initiatives and plans. And so I'm excited to introduce you.
Yeah, so I really just want to say, hi to everyone. It's an honor to have been selected for this role. I'm really looking forward to getting to know each and every one of you and contributing to all the work that's going on. My name is spelled wrong. I will share that. So if you're trying to hunt me down, I'm Matthews with 1 T.
Oh, 1 T.
Just in case. So yeah, if you send me an email, it'll get bounced back. Yeah, so if there's anything you'd like to know about me, just
can you talk a little bit about, so Stevie went through a very robust recruitment process and many conversations. One of the things that stood out to me was your experience in public engagement and your philosophies around working with the community. Can you talk a little bit about with the board, just about your approach to getting the feedback from the community and the bus operators and everything? I think that's an important story to talk about.
Oh, sure. I think it's very much because it's layered. So I came up through operations into scheduling and into planning. So I kind of see this as a spectrum of all the different roles that kind of fall under this umbrella, how that touches everyone, and how everything that overlaps, you really need to have this open line of communication, this constant conversation and dialogue where you're not just telling someone, you know, here's what we're going to do. You're getting that feedback. You're saying, I've listened to you. Am I hearing this correctly? You know, going back and forth before you just insist you have the right idea. So we've done that both in many ways, as you would with the general public, as you would expect to go out with, you know, community outreach, but also internally to make sure you're touching all your departments and especially your best assets that you have or your operators who are out there every day, who know what's going on. And they're the first ones that talk to the public too. So to have them on the same page with you is just invaluable.
Well, don't have to ask for questions if you don't want, but.
Well,
Go Steelers.
But yeah, and she is a transit nerd. We confirmed
Yes.
that. So we've got a, did you say you have a transit nerd shirt? Is that right?
I do. Yeah, my father was a mechanic, so I grew up in the industry. So I can also hang out with John in the garage.
How many weeks? How many weeks or months have you on board?
This is week 2.
Week 2.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna put you on the spot. So what you think of the organization? so
Don't worry,
far?
right out of the box. Yeah, right now. No, it's been a really great environment so far. Everyone's been overwhelmingly welcoming. So I'm very impressed. I'm really just looking forward to getting further into the systems to start to bring together a lot of the things that it looks like you're, you know, looking for answers towards. Listening to the questions that have come up, I was like, oh, I wish I could have, you know, already provided more information so far, but you know, next month you'll hear more from me, I'm sure.
And Stevie, you've met Hillary. Hillary was actually nice enough to help sit on some of the panels, but she's right next door. So when you don't come back for 3 days, we're gonna be like, oh, Hillary and Stevie are over there plotting, coming up with all of these transportation exciting ideas. But so,
I'm for it.
right. Well, welcome again. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I mean, I certainly.
What's your favorite,
Oh, go ahead.
what's your favorite transit system to ride besides Dash?
No, including Dash.
Besides that.
I mean, can I use Pittsburgh as my home base just because it's such a diversified system between having a special place in my heart too for paratransit services, you know, what a valuable service that provides. Love the light rail. I've worked for 2 out of the 3 agencies in the country that do incline planes. So that's my weird little niche I have as a background. Yeah, so really just loved being a part of that system.
Do you have a favorite DC Metro station yet?
I can't say I do.
Okay.
At some point, you're gonna have to be part of that activity where what's your favorite bus stop, or didn't you do that one year?
Well, we've done favorite small business, we did favorite place in Alexandria, but you always have, we do an icebreaker every year for the board and staff could participate in that too. But maybe we'll do our favorite metro stay, although, but it would have to be within Alexandria, wouldn't it? Because we always do Alexandria based activities, so figure. Well, actually, and one year we did and I think Edward. Well, no, Brent won this. We did, people could show us their smart trip activity because it would show you what percentile you were in of all riders. Those of us who ride a lot of Dash actually were at a disadvantage because we don't tap our smart trip cards anymore. But those who lived in DC, like Edward, who commuted from on Metro bus and Metro rail, were beating all of us. So we decided we can't do that activity anymore because, you know, board was being creamed in it. But yeah, but we try to bring in mass transit related things around the city, just even to just for some levity in our own meetings and to get to know each other better. And I'll look forward to your input as you get to know the area. I was gonna just say, I mean, as it sounds like was kind of conveyed in the interview, I mean, our riders expect a lot of engagement and participate a lot in the shaping of the system. You heard tonight with line 32, I think we're gonna be having to message and hear a lot from folks about impacts of that. And so, as you get involved in the update to the transit strategic plan for next spring, be interesting to see as you partner with Camilla's group to different ways that we can involve people in that process. So that way they can provide feedback. Because even if we're not seeing a lot of changes in the system from year to year, we want people to better understand how they can use Dash differently and to educate them as well as the system. But we get a lot of good feedback from riders, and a lot of our boards and commissions are very interested around the city in kind of transit. And so look forward to you being able to go out and speak to them. Your predecessor did a lot of that. And I think you and Camilla are probably going to be the two, in addition to the most public facing people within Dash. And so look forward to you kind of conveying the story of what Dash can do and how it's serving the community, what we can do better. So, welcome.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. Thank you.
All right, home stretch for you all. So just wanted to point out that we were honored to be recognized with the 82 Alliance Better Tomorrow Award. Just provided a synopsis here for you of what that is. Yvonne unfortunately is not here this evening. We were all triple scheduled, but she went down to, I believe it was Nashville, to receive that award. And so we're really interested in that organization. And again, I won't read the summary that's in your packet, but nevertheless, it's just nice to be recognized for our leadership in how we expand mobility with. And the last item is just ridership. We talked about this earlier. Ridership was down for the months of September and October. We're likely to see that also some in November, but largely attributable to the government shutdown that did have an impact on us. So we'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the year. And I'm excited. Stevie has told me she's a big data person and she's going to really help us with our data game, and she's a big technology person. So I'm excited to see a lot more information and analytics coming to you all. She's already got some ideas of things that we can help show you of what's going on within the system. So more to come. I'll turn it back over to you. Or
so we do have a brief executive session that Josh asked to be added to the agenda. I'll announce that our next meeting will be January 14th. We're going to Beatley Library to continue at least once a year, being west of Quaker Lane. So look forward to that. And actually, if that works as a meeting facility, because I've always said with this facility, one of the challenges is that although there's transit along Duke Street, it is a bit of, for folks with mobility challenges, actually getting here from the transit can be difficult. Beatley really is a great opportunity to be on Duke Street and to have people be able to get off right in front of the building. So if that works, we may be there a little more often. We have the motion to enter into executive session. If somebody would like to read off the.
And sorry, the screen is red. It's A4.
Okay.
I, Jesse O'Connell, move that the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing matters pursuant to section 2.2-3711, section A4, A6, and A7 of the Code of Virginia.
It has been moved. Is there a second? Second, Matt. All in favor? Aye. All right. Board will stand in executive session. To all our staff, happy holidays. Thank you all for what you do for this organization.
Thank you. Josh, I know you put in the
notes. All right. So,
all right,
you're all set.
I think I have to do this. I took a second, right? I, Jesse O'Connell, move to reconvene the public meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors. Jesse O'Connell.
Well, we have separate. We had a
oh, great. To this. Sorry.
So Jesse has made a motion. Fuller is seconding. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I, Jesse O'Connell, move to certify that pursuant to section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters that were identified in the motion by which the executive session was convened and are lawfully exempt from the Freedom of Information Act and the Act's open meeting requirements were heard, discussed, or considered by the board during this executive session.
All right, moved by Jesse. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. So now we step to move to adjourn.
Auctioneer pattern. Yeah, so moved.
Oh, we don't have to. Oh, we usually do. We don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Unless you still.
Meeting's adjourned.
Yep.
Let's not the Robert's rules nuances over here.
Not the amount of money Americans waste on.
See you, Rish.
Hey guys, happy holidays, everyone.
Great.